Welcome, welcome, You-est listeners. Thank you for being here today. This is Julie, and this is a real special treat today. I was so delighted when I found out that Pamela Miles was going to be our guest. I recently did a Reiki 1 training, and it has changed my life. So you are going to learn so much about Reiki and way more. Let me tell you about Pamela before you get to meet her. Pamela Miles is an international spiritual teacher. She's a Reiki master and integrative health consultant with 5 decades of spiritual practice. She is the foremost pioneer introducing Reiki practice to conventional medicine, including Harvard and Yale medical schools and the NIH. She is the author of various peer-reviewed medical papers and the award-winning book, Reiki, A Comprehensive Guide. Her work has been featured by NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox, U.S. News and World Report, New York Magazine, Allure, and Self. You can find Pamela at reikiinmedicine.org. And as always, we will have everything in the show notes for you so that you can find her blog and find anything and everything all Reiki and all Pamela. Without further ado, let me just say thank you and welcome, Pamela. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Julie. I love any opportunity that I get to talk to people about Reiki practice because many people have never heard of it, and yet the people who have learned to practice as you have said exactly what you just said. It's changed my life. And, it gently transforms your life. It's not like you have to go on a fast or you have to go trekking in the Himalayas. It's something that's so easy to bring into your life, and you start seeing the benefit from day one.
Yeah, I want to make a note to come back to the benefits and like all things Reiki. Before we even do that, because I think this is quite interesting. I know you have 50 years of spiritual practice. You have 25 years of yoga and spiritual practice before Reiki. So can you tell us a little bit about your kind of background in the spiritual practice world, yoga, and then how you got to being an expert in Reiki?
I was always very interested in the inner life and didn't realize that not everybody else is.
Right.
So I actually started practicing meditation and yoga when I was a kid from a book.
Wow.
And it was kind of a relief to me to find out that this thing that happened with me so spontaneously, where I would just be quiet and go into a meditative state, that it actually was something, that I wasn't just lazy and a daydreamer. So I had a chance to live in an ashram in India for a couple of years when I was in my mid-20s, and it was very rigorous training, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, waking up at 2 in the morning to put in a few hours of meditation, and hours a day of spiritual practice. And it was a time of making friends with my mind in a way that has made everything else that I've done possible, including being on screen in a podcast, because I'm really like a borderline recluse, I'd rather just stay home.
Awesome.
I'm joking, but
That's awesome.
it's lovely to meet people, but it's been a stretch for me to be as public as I've become. So it wasn't simply a matter of learning about spiritual practice, and the techniques and but also seeing the change in myself, seeing how I could open doors that didn't seem like they wanted to open inside of me.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Actually, it's interesting. We've talked a lot on this show about the importance of meditation. It's something that has changed my life. I don't have as long tenure with it, but I love what you said, and I'm curious maybe to extrapolate. You said both that you were able to make friends with your mind and open doors within yourself. And I'm thinking those that are listening, we haven't even gotten to Reiki yet. But like, those that are listening are probably like, I'd like to do that. Is there any tips or information you have? I mean, I know, not everyone can go to an ashram, but just how you've learned to do that, maybe some ways that people listening can learn to make friends with their mind.
Yeah. Well, one thing would be to find a good Reiki class.
Mm,
That certainly is an option, and one that people don't necessarily know about. If people are aware of Reiki practice, they tend to think of it in terms of treatment. Oh, I have to make an appointment, like
yeah.
I might make an appointment for a massage or a private yoga class or something like that. But and that's great. I don't want to discourage people from doing that. But the real secret jewel here
Yeah.
is that you can learn to practice on yourself. And if any of your listeners are thinking, yeah, I can't meditate I can't still my mind, I can't do this. That's the person, especially for whom Reiki practice is useful, because you don't have to do any of those things.
Yeah.
Reiki practice at the beginning level, which is all that most people need, is as simple as I place my hands and now I'm practicing Reiki.
Yeah.
I take my hands away and now I'm not.
Yeah.
And so all we need our mind for is to remember
Mm.
to place a hand or both hands, because sometimes maybe you're in a meeting or something, you place a hand on your abdomen unobtrusively. And then once you have that hand placement, you feel your system start to respond
Yeah.
to the practice. And the response is a self-healing balancing response. So our systems, from their own innate wisdom, our bodies know how to heal.
Yeah.
We tend to get in the way because we have so much going on in our minds, because we're anticipating, because we're anxious, we become fearful, we're second guessing ourselves. I mean, we all have our own versions of how we trip ourselves up. But our bodies, if we can get them out from under some of that silliness,
Yeah.
they do very well. So that's what Reiki practice helps with.
Right.
It reminds our bodies of their own capacity to heal. And typically, given that most people are unbalanced in
Yeah.
the direction of being overstimulated, of being stressed,
Yeah.
typically what we see is that the person's nervous system downregulates from within. And this is an important part. I'm not like placing my hands and saying, downregulate, downregulate, downregulate. I'm just placing my hands, and then maybe I'm spacing out or having a conversation or whatever else is going on. And that response is spontaneous.
Right.
It's spontaneous from within, so it's not an intervention that's done to you. It's a practice that gently evokes your self-healing response. And then once your nervous system starts down-regulating and you move into a more neutral state, what doctors and nurses talk about, the parasympathetic nervous system dominance. This is our rest and digest phase.
Right.
And once we move out of that sympathetic fight or flight, where we're so full of anxiety and self-doubt often, then our bodies can take over and start healing. They cannot heal when we're in an agitated state.
Yeah.
It's just not the way the body is made. So this very simple practice that we can literally do while we're watching the Yankees lose the pennant, for example. I mean, that's not my daily practice is in bed when I'm alone and I'm quiet. But when I'm watching one of my sports teams
That's
and
great.
they're not doing so well, I really do some extra practice
Great.
to settle myself. And then you can feel the response. The response can be subtle, but very often there are at least aspects of it that are quite noticeable.
Right. So I think this is so great because you kind of hit I don't want to say birds with a stone. It's never a great metaphor, but you're hitting a lot of key points, because one of the things, I know I've done a lot on meditation, and I've heard from many of the community listeners that there's some that struggle. I sometimes struggle with being, quiet and still. And it's not saying not to try that or to do that, but what you're talking about, and this really is perfect, because I would love to hear more about what actually Reiki means, how you got into it, but you kind of got right to the point, which is awesome, that when you learn to do this on yourself, which is my finding, it has a similar effect as meditation, because you're literally calming your stress response and you're allowing your body to heal on its own by using these hand positions that you use. Now, you'll teach this more, way
Well,
better.
all spiritual practice is balancing. All spiritual
Yeah.
practices have the same goal, to
Yeah.
bring us back to ourselves, to help us be more present,
Yeah.
because our spiritual power
Mm,
is available in the present moment only.
right.
So if we're scattered all the time, we're depleting our inner resources, we're missing
Mm,
opportunities to support ourselves, we're missing opportunities to help others.
wow.
You know? So spiritual practice, whether it's prayer,
Yeah.
qigong, yoga, meditation,
Yeah.
rituals, I mean, there's so many, and people have to
Right.
find the spiritual practice that appeals to them,
Yeah.
because you're going to spend time doing it.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of taking a weekend class or an afternoon seminar and then it's been
Right.
there, done that. No, you learn how to practice, and then the point is you actually practice.
Yeah.
So the fact that Reiki can be practiced so easily,
Right.
and that the response, at least on a physiologic level, is generally so quick, that people actually will say after a few minutes, I feel better, I feel some improvement. I'm not all better,
Yeah.
like if somebody's undergoing cancer treatment,
Right.
there's the disease, and then there's how depleting the necessary treatment is.
Mm,
So if a cancer patient gets a Reiki treatment or starts practicing on herself, and she's like, wow, I can't believe it, I feel better.
yeah.
I remember one woman who came to one of my classes. She came the second session. I teach in 3 sessions. And she said, this morning, for the first time in 2 years since I got my diagnosis, I woke up and I felt optimistic about my day.
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
this makes a huge difference. The
Yeah.
way we feel
Yeah.
affects the way we heal.
Yeah. That's so well said. Could we, Pamela, and I know you're like literally an expert in this. I'm thinking for those that are like, I think I know what Reiki is. I've had Reiki. I'm not sure. I have a sense of it. I know Qigong. I know this. Would you mind like maybe just helping us get what it is, what it means, maybe starting to get a little bit into both the practice of it, the science behind it. I'm going to just give you free reign, because I know that this is like, your expertise. Pamela has a beautiful, beautiful book, as I told you in the intro. It caught my eye when I was at the Reiki training. I was like, oh my gosh, who is this? This book is like a Bible. Like everyone needs this. So take it away, Pamela. Can you share with us a little bit more about background and history and what it really means?
Reiki is a spiritual practice, like meditation, like yoga. But unlike those two, it's a contemporary spiritual practice. It dates back to a Japanese man named Mikao Usui, who lived from 1865 to 1926. He was a lifelong spiritual aspirant. He was also a family man. He had a wife and 2 kids. And as people who have a profound yearning, spiritual yearning, often experience, worldly life wasn't all that satisfying to him. It appears, and I have to say that we don't have a lot of really clear documentation about this. But in 1922, he made a pilgrimage to Mount Kurama, a holy mountain in Japan, with the intention to fast and meditate until he either died or he had a spiritual breakthrough. And fortunately for us, he had the spiritual breakthrough. And it took a few weeks, I mean, and he told his friends, if I don't come down, come collect my bones, because I'm not leaving without this experience that my heart longs for. And that was really the birth of this practice. And I like to remind people of that story, because sometimes we see Reiki expressed as a stress reduction technique or something like that. And yes, of course, stress is reduced by any spiritual practice, but a spiritual practice is a much larger umbrella than a stress reduction technique, because spiritual practice means that we come to get to know that timeless inner core, our true essence, who we really are, that part of us that is never born and never dies, and when we practice, to whatever degree happens in any particular session, somehow we become more aware of our timelessness, and that changes our perspective on life. Besides on a physiological level, meaning we move out of a combative state into a collaborative state, we also, those doors that I was talking about, it's the doors to the heart, the doors to the experience of unconditional love. And I'm not pretending that I walk around in this exalted state every day, all day, 24/7. No, it's not like that. I live in New York City.
Enough said.
So do a lot of other people, and we often want to go the same place at the same time.
Yes, enough said about that. Yes.
But regardless what is happening in the day-to-day, the moment by moment, I do have this abiding awareness that that's the tip of the iceberg, and what's important is the larger picture. In a way that it's like having a spring that's open in my heart, a bubbling, restorative spring that I can drink from anytime I want to. And I try not to wait until I need to, but certainly there are times when I feel I need to, but the point is to practice every day. This isn't conventional medicine where you go to the doctor when you're hurt or you're sick, because otherwise the doctor probably doesn't know how to help you. There has to be a problem. We're talking about your self-practice, your daily self-practice becoming your primary health care. Because when you influence your system out of that stress response into the restorative state, then your body starts taking care of a lot of things that it was too preoccupied by stress to address before. So what happens is that typically we see people feel better. They feel an improvement in affect. They're not so anxious. They feel less depressed. And I'm not saying it's not click your fingers and depression is a thing of the past. I'm saying there's an opening. You see possibilities. You have a sense of well-being. You have a sense of self-confidence and confidence in life. These are all spiritual healing indications. This is not something you can take in a capsule.
Right. So true. For people who may not know, remind me, Reiki actually stands for, is it universal energy?
Yeah, I don't go there.
Okay.
And the reason why I don't go there is because I've traveled enough, and I'm mostly an English speaker, but I speak a smattering of languages because I travel a lot, and I speak a bit more French. So I have enough experience with language and culture to realize how much misunderstanding happens when we think that there is such a thing as direct translation. because
Brilliant.
language doesn't exist like a mathematical equation out of context.
Right.
2 plus 2 equals 4 is 2 plus 2 equals 4, no matter what language it's
Right.
in.
Right.
But everything other than mathematics
Yeah. Yeah.
is a little more nuanced. And language reflects understanding and values of a culture. So Japanese culture has an aesthetic and has a spiritual richness that European-based American culture, sorry fellas,
Yeah.
we just don't have.
Yeah.
So rather than trying to bottom line it as we Americans do, and fit the ocean into a cup, to use St. Augustine's metaphor, I would rather keep it open, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because spiritual practice is about exploration and discovery. And
Mm.
and as a friend of mine often says, question your answers.
I love that.
We don't want to have answers that stop the conversation, that stop the exploration.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And I think that really what the Reiki Kanji points to, and remember, Japanese language doesn't have words, it has
Right.
pictograms. It's
Mhm.
a little bit like if we were to talk in poetry,
Yeah.
instead of giving it to each other straight, as New Yorkers certainly are wont to do. So we want to keep it open. We want to keep a space for nuance. We want to have respect for one another, that it's not so easy to understand
Yes.
something that is constantly in flux.
Yeah.
In other words, reality.
Yeah. Well said. I think to break it down, maybe just to give people a sense who've not tried it, because when you were talking about self-practice, like before I took the training, the truth is I took it so I could start practicing on myself, because I felt like, I love giving to other people. I'm designed that way. I love being of service. And I realized I need something and want something that I can first and make sure I'm really giving to myself first so I can be totally filled up and as in balance as I can. And when I learned, I guess with Reiki 1, so there are what, 8 positions, hand positionings. I didn't realize like it is so easy and intuitive. And I don't want to water it down, but just for those listening, it's like, for them to get a conceptual idea of it, maybe just to talk about that. And then scientifically or medically, I don't know if you have this answer, but can you explain what is happening when you have your hands in these 8 positions or with your hand activation? Because I can definitely feel something, and I'm curious. I don't know what your how you would define that.
Well, Reiki is a spiritual practice, and spirituality is the realm of mystery.
Oh, I
And,
love
and
that.
as I said before,
Yeah.
exploration and discovery.
Yeah.
This is how we gradually, over time, move into a greater fullness of self-recognition. The big self, not speaking of just our individuality, but
Yeah.
as the French mystic Teilhard de Chardin once said, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
So spiritual practice is how we move gently from identifying with this individual who's going to die. And therefore, life as a human being is fraught with conflict and danger and
Mhm.
fear. And if we only identify with being this human, we're going to be anxious a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But if we identify with this, I like to call it oneness or timelessness,
Yeah.
that is accessible within all of us,
Yeah.
that is who we are at the core, and we identify in a very real way, not a conceptual way, but
Mhm.
a very real heart way,
Mhm.
as the oneness that happens to be manifesting as this human being, then life is a whole lot more fun. There's more joy. We're able to stay with our creativity. So We don't know everything about anything, really.
Yeah.
I mean, dark matter and dark energy, that's what, about 94, 95% of the universe. So even scientists,
Yeah. Even more, I think. Yeah.
they don't know. Yeah, in 96 maybe, but really, if people who study reality and measure it and everything don't know about most reality, why should we think that we should?
Yeah.
So we don't understand why
Right.
this happens, how it happens. And
Right.
I know many Reiki masters will give you their version of it, but that's really their belief system.
Right.
And I'm not saying their belief system is wrong, not at all. What I am saying is you don't have to share that belief system to benefit from Reiki practice.
So well
So,
said. Yeah.
so you practice, and we have some understanding of the physiologic response, that downregulation of the nervous system, and how that changes what's possible and in our bodies. And one thing it changes is our ability to perceive, because when we're very stressed, when we're traumatized,
Mm,
all we can perceive is threat.
yeah.
Our nervous system is created that way, and it's probably a good thing, because when there's a life threat, we don't have time to think about, well, what would be the best way to get out of this, right? We've got to have our instincts there and
Yeah.
be able to move on a dime with Herculean strength if needed.
Right.
So that's what the stress response is really about. So once we get out of that, and we don't get out of it on our own so well, because the pace of modern life is such that it keeps getting activated.
Yes, for sure.
So we have a spiritual practice, in this case Reiki practice, that reminds our system. I think of it as ET phone home.
I love that. I remember that movie.
And then you can feel it. You can feel your experience change. People feel their breath opens. It doesn't necessarily get deeper. Sometimes it gets more subtle, but there's greater ease.
Yeah.
And something that happens when we move out of the stress response is that we stop the cascades of stress hormones. So our biochemistry changes. The flow of cortisol in our bloodstream changes
Mm,
almost immediately when we move out of that stress state. And then we move into neutral, and then we can move into self-healing. And there's not a lot. I mean, I'm supposedly, and I'm not arguing with myself about this, the foremost international expert on medical Reiki.
yeah.
I've done more integrating of Reiki practice as a spiritual practice into conventional medicine than any other Reiki master on the planet.
Right.
And so when I say that there's not a lot of good research into Reiki practice, I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not necessary to have more research, because
Hmm.
the response is so observable. And we have identified a couple of factors that indicate that we're literally, the human system is moving into a state of greater resilience.
So beautiful. Can can you talk about this is so conversation is so fascinating. I love it. And I'm like, okay, my brain is going a million miles. I have so many questions. I'm going to hone myself in because I would love to talk about some of what you were going to talk about what you've noticed with Reiki and medicine, with medical Reiki, maybe what you've noticed in the bodily functions. What have you seen or noticed with people that you've worked with? Like, what have you observed that maybe some might say are miraculous or incredible that I'm guessing are probably commonplace at this point with your work?
What we see is people doing better than would be expected.
Yeah.
And this was what the infectious disease specialists back in the 90s noticed with their AIDS patients, and this was before the protease inhibitors, before the medications that we have now that are really helping people live with HIV and live well.
Yeah.
And so I had a program at Gay Men's Health Crisis, and I was teaching people who had been diagnosed how to practice on themselves. And I think that's significant. It wasn't that they had to go for yet another treatment. It was something that they could do to help themselves at a time when there was very little that conventional medicine had to offer. And, doctors want to help people. So when they started seeing patients who were basically not dying,
Right.
and they would question them, well, what are you doing? You're looking well. As one doctor later told me, invariably that patient would say something about Reiki practice.
Mm.
And so it was out of that I was invited to create the first ever hospital program, in which I then was training in hospital, training HIV/AIDS patients,
Wow.
practice Reiki. And so what we saw was that, for one thing, people felt better, and that's a big deal.
Right.
Because when we feel better,
Yeah.
we also function better.
Yeah.
And when we function better, we make better choices.
Yes.
And when we're functioning better, we're better partners with our caregivers.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to something you said before, Julie, because when I train families, parents, I say to them, the care of the family begins with the care of the caregiver. When I train healthcare staff, I say the care of the patient begins with the care of the caregiver. We have an attitude that I take care of you at my expense. And, I'm a parent. I raised 2 kids as a single mom, and I understand there are times when it's like that. But there's an awful lot that we can do that is more of a circle of healing. And when we keep ourselves in good shape, when we keep our systems healthy, balanced, and resilient, we have more to offer the people around us, whether it's professionally or personally. But also, the most important thing we offer them is the quality of our own presence. When we're not running around trying to correct God's mistakes, we can sit with somebody who is struggling and not have to fix it for them. We can be a witness who is confident in their ability to sort it out. And that actually helps people regain their confidence and feel like, okay, I'm going through a rough patch here, but I have support, and I can be creative, and I can work towards the outcome that I desire.
So powerful and beautifully said, Pamela. One of the things I know you have a lot of programs. I know you have a blog, and I'm thinking for those, I mean, after I want to say thank you to Ellen, I think Sosinski and her husband and the group I was with. It was so powerful. I started practicing right away, and it's made my husband's noticed. I've noticed, and it's subtle. But I'll say that I've noticed just much more calmness, and actually clarity is the way it shows up for me, more focus and just being very grounded. And balance, that's the best word. Yeah. Balance, really. And I've done other healing modalities, and it's shown up even in my energy. I can feel that. And I was going to ask you, because I, when I do anything I love, I tell a lot of people, and I'm like, you've got to take a Reiki 1 class. You've just got to do it. Not everyone lives near me in the DC area. And so I remember in this group that, some people talked about there were classes that were online that were not as well run. And I know with you, you're an expert. You've been doing this for years and years, and you do have a really incredible program and way for people to do Reiki certification or training. And I was just hoping maybe you could tell people about it a little bit, because for those who can't find somebody near them, I literally have talked to probably 50 people in the last month, and I'm like, you've got to find someone. And I don't know anyone other than like the few people near me, and now you, of course. But maybe you can share for those that are also, time bound, or, want maybe to do it virtually, but want to make sure it's an awesome experience.
I think that the internet, I mean, clearly, look, that's how we're able to communicate with each other and
Yeah.
all of your listeners. The internet is an amazing thing that we want to use well. And when I started offering what I call Reiki self care training online, I was determined that it was not going to be canned. I don't agree with these
Yeah.
videos that you watch. I think it's important that there's human interaction, and whenever possible that you're in the same room. But I also found that there are so many people who didn't realize there are no standards for Reiki training. So you were lucky. I mean, to train with Ellen, she's such a wonderful and dedicated Reiki master, and very thorough and very available. But
Yes.
not everybody, the public is making choices about Reiki training when they don't really know
Right.
what goes into it, and they have the understandable misunderstanding that
Right.
everything Reiki is the same, and it's not.
Right.
The term has no standardization attached to it.
Right.
There are people who consider themselves Reiki masters who have less training than Ellen's first degree students or my first degree students.
Wow.
So in response to that, and in appreciating the very real needs of people who can't get out of bed, for example, or have young children at home,
Right.
can't afford to have a babysitter, and go out at night, I started offering interactive Reiki self-care training in a teleconference setting. So we're live, we're interacting, we're practicing together. People can ask their questions. It's 3 sessions, like a Saturday and a Sunday, and then a week later, so that people practice on their own for a period of time, and then we come back together, and I can really support them. I call it Reiki self-care rather than first degree, because in a first degree class, and I know this is true of the class that you took, besides learning self-practice, which is the foundation,
Yeah.
we also get to practice on one another.
Yeah.
In my classes, we do a little chair practice, and then the last day I open up some tables, and I know Ellen does this too,
Yeah.
and we practice, we do table treatment, which is everybody's most favorite time of the class. And so by far, that is the best setting to learn in. But if you can't get to that,
Yeah.
take a look at the teleconference training that I offer, because it will get you started on your self-care, and who knows what will open up from that.
Mm.
Thank you for asking me about that.
Absolutely. And I'm just letting people know, I always say, hey, if you're driving or you can't get this information, I will make sure to get all of those links from Pamela, and they'll be in our show notes. And we'll have, again, Pamela's website. So you can always, anyone can connect with you, I'm assuming, about the Reiki self-care training. And then I know you also have the Heart of Meditation retreat that's coming up in Mexico.
It's the Heart of Practice Reiki
Oh, the
retreat.
Heart of Practice Reiki. I'm so sorry.
We
That makes sense.
might do a little bit of meditation too, but for anybody who is already practicing, it's a wonderful 6 days, 7 nights. We're right on the beach on the Pacific coast, and we practice together. We
Uh,
self-practice. We have some Reiki conversation, discussion, inquiry, according to what people are interested in. I let each particular group co-create the content, and then we have delicious food. I mean, so good, this food.
awesome.
And we have some time off in the afternoons, and then we gather together and have table practice and watch the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. So it is a profoundly delightful but also restorative time.
Yeah.
One of the women who was at the last retreat told me that she came with a recurring medical condition
Mm,
that was troublesome, not, fatal or anything like that, but troublesome. And she said she hasn't had a recurrence
mm.
since the retreat. And she's been really
Wow.
amazed at how deep the healing was.
Amazing. Well, I am just so grateful to you, honestly, for your, deciding years and years ago to get into both spiritual practice, but that led you to this work, and especially um, the medical side of it in hospitals, creating a program, and then what you're doing in the world with your books, speaking, articles, teaching, and we'll make sure to have all your information. I can only say that just it's been over probably a month, maybe a month and a half now since I did my training, and I've been practicing every morning. And by the way, just, what I love is it's free, it's natural. My favorite thing is, I just have to share this quickly. I reframed my entire, for my whole life, I've been doing this whole snooze thing. And I'm like, from now on, there's no more snoozing. I do my 8 hand positions and that's my 30 minutes of snoozing. It's been like a game changer for me. And it's easy. And I love that it's a natural resource and it's a natural healing spiritual practice. So I'm just so grateful to have you here. I know that this is, a lot of your life's work and your expertise, and just you can hear the passion and your dedication to this. And we'll have all your info. And I know anyone that's looking for the ability to learn how to do this, you guys would be lucky to do this with Pamela, because I know in talking to you even before, I'm like, oh my gosh, you are so knowledgeable and wise. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you, Julie, and for your warmth and your hospitality. I can feel it through the screen of my computer. And if I could take one more minute, I just want to point out,
Sure.
in case anybody who is listening already practices Reiki, I offer a Reiki and medicine intensive, most often here in New York. It's 3 full days, but occasionally I am invited out of town. And for anyone who is certainly a Reiki professional who wants to understand the interface of conventional medicine and Reiki as a spiritual practice, so that you can communicate the value of the practice and expand your professional practice so you can help more people. This is really a game changer. But I've also had many people who aren't professionals who wanted to be better informed in making healthcare choices for themselves.
Mm.
Sometimes people who have chronic illness, or parents, who really feel this responsibility of the choices they're making for their children. And you'll come out of this time with a lot of practice. Wherever I am, Julie, we always practice. It's never just theoretical, but also a lot of information that is in common sense language. So we're not going to be doing organic chem here, but I will help you understand research, what it's showing us, what it can never show us,
Mm.
and how to talk about Reiki practice and appreciate it intellectually as well as practically.
Oh, so brilliant. So brilliant. So it's Reiki and medicine, intense and intensive.
Yes.
And you have this on your website as well.
Yeah, so I'll send you the links so you can post them in the
Beautiful.
video
Show
notes.
notes. Excellent. So awesome. I can just imagine so many people, whether you're in the medical field, whether you're holistic practitioner, or interested. I mean, I'm like, I hope I can make it. I would be there. That sounds fascinating. Really fascinating. Well, wonderful. I just thank you so much, Pamela. This was so much fun, and really grateful for you and what you're doing. I just my little my little debut with Reiki. What I can say is it's a game. It's a life changer. Will be doing this the rest of my life every day, one day at a time.
Yes, I agree with you. And I love it when I hear people say that, So thank you for helping to get the word out, Lisa. Really, your effort is deeply appreciated.